Hey everyone, my name is Antonio Alonso, and today I'm going to be talking about how Beyoncé Cowboys Carter album and arguing why it should be seen as a form of contemporary literature. Even though it's a musical album, it really does use storytelling, memory, history, and even genre that is extremely similar to what we see that's in written text. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So, what even counts as literature? So, when most people hear the word literature, think about literature, and I'm one of those people, we usually think about books, novels, and even just written text that we read. But in all reality, literature is really about storytelling, voice, culture, and even meaning. It's not just pages, but it's really about feeling emotion also. I kind of want to compare this to this scholar named Robert Eggleston. He kind of explains that contemporary literature includes any form that kind of makes us think about humanity, society, and even identity. So, because literature is about ideas more than format, music can absolutely be like literature. Music really does carry this emotion, this narrative, and even a culture of meaning, which is why Beyonce's music is literally like literature. Her album, Cowboy Carter, is literature. Next one. My thesis. So my argument is that Cowboy Carter should be considered as contemporary literature because it really does use a lot of storytelling, history, cultural memory, black womanhood, and even genre disruption. This is kind of the same way or similar way you would read in written works or written text in novels. Even though it is music, even though this is music that we're hearing, the album really does read like this narrative. It explores identity, culture, and even power. This is why Beyonce uses a sound, and this is why Beyonce's sound really does sound like an author uses pages. So here's my storytelling and narrative. So one reason why Cowboy Carter really does work like literature is because it has a clear narrative. So it kind of opens up with this American Requiem, which this pretty much kind of prolongs to a prologue. Beyonce addresses the criticism and sets the tone for the story that she's about to tell. Then she talks about Blackbird. This kind of feels like a healing moment you would kind of feel in a written text. It pretty much features this young black woman in a country music who hasn't really historically been given space in the genre. And third is going to be about the daughter. This kind of works like a emotional climax, something you find in a novel or a text. The lines that Beyonce says, like, "Mama, I tried," kind of feels like a dialogue from a novel and really shows a generational pain. This album really just ends with confidence and really does give a full narrative structure that's kind of similar to a book or a novel that you would read. History and memory. So Beyonce also uses this album to really bring their race history back into the spotlight. According to Andrew Cho's article in Time, black musicians really helped build country music. From the African origins of the banjo, they interrogated to early recording sessions. They kind of built like this reputation for themselves, but the industry later pushed them aside, pushed them out. But Beyonce is bringing it back. Beyonce is the first ever black woman to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. She kind of restores that part of history that's been ignored. She restored it back to spotlight. She restored back the black musicians and how they helped build country music. This is literally, I'm going to say literature because it preserves memory and it even rewriting the dominant narrative. Let's go a slide. Black womanhood and voice. So, the album also kind of centers the black womanhood in ways that really connect to writers like Toni Morrison and June Jordan. Beyonce really does show in her music or even lyrics about vulnerability, strength, anger, joy, and even softness all at once. She really does give a full and real voice to the black womanhood, which I love. Her lyrics really do use a lot of poetic imagery, like the biblical reference in Daughter. That kind of functions like poetry on a page, It kind of like reads like you're reading a novel, but you're honestly listening to music. So I want to kind of sum it up that Beyonce, Morrison, and Jordan all tell their stories about identity, survival, and just reclaiming their voice, but they do it in different ways. The genre bending. So Beyonce really does refuse to stay inside one genre. She doesn't like staying in one genre. She likes to go to all these different genres. For example, Cowboy Carter is a blend of country, R&B, soul, gospel, and even rock. Songs like Yeah Yeah and even her version of Jolene really does flip this expectation and show how the transforms traditional country music. It really does transform it. Scholars like Bronner and Miller kind of explain that contemporary literature often breaks genre rules. It really does it so it can challenge systems and even create a new meaning and a new beginning. Just like what Beyonce does. This musically or this Cowboy Carter really does bring her genre bending. It really does bend the genre. And it's really both artistic and even political, which I love so much. Let's go to the next one. My counter argument. So some people argue that music isn't literature because it's not written on pages, but I disagree with that. Definitely disagree with that. Lyrics are text, of course, but they can be read, they can be analyzed and interpreted the same ways we analyze poems. Spoken word poetry is considered literature, and even music is simply poetry, but it's just performed with melody, it's performed with emotion and voice and feelings. So literature really does evolve, and today it still storytells exist in many forms. Music really does feel like this emotion, and it really does tell a story. It really does tell a story of emotion and everything. So here are my research and sources. So my argument is supported by several scholars like Eagle Stone because it helps me define what contemporary literature is. And it really does show that literature does go beyond traditional books. Bronner and Miller, they pretty much write a lot about genre breaking expectations. And this really connects deeply and directly to Beyonce's musical choices. So at the time, article provides the articles I chose really do provide historical context by really showing how Black artists shaped country music, but they were pushed out. But Beyonce really does bring it back to life in her Cowboy Carter. So these are my strengths for the research and why this album is really considered as literature. Why it matters. So this matters because it really does expand or even influence how we define literature. If we only called written books literature or reading a text literature, we would ignore the storytelling that's happening in music. We would ignore the storytelling happening when Black women explain it. Cowboy Carter really does make this space for Black voices in country and really just show how music can carry history, identity, and even emotion that is just in a novel and a poem. I want to say Beyonce isn't just participating in this genre, but she's really, and I mean really changing the conversation and really showing how literature can look like today and music and how it could be a storytelling. With that, this is my works cited. And honestly, I really did love this theme. I love talking about Beyonce and how she really did a great job. And yeah, with that, I hope you liked it. That's the end of my presentation. And yeah, I really hope this helped you really see Beyonce Cowboys Carter as contemporary literature and how music is a very powerful form of storytelling. Either way, it's not a form of written text or read from a book. But with that, thank you so much, and I appreciate you listening.